What if midlife wasn't the beginning of decline, but the gateway to your most vibrant, powerful years? In this conversation, we'll explore how science and sacred feminine wisdom come together to transform how you feel, heal, and live so you can thrive, not just survive. Hi, and welcome to the U World Order Showcase podcast, where we feature life health transformational coaches and spiritual entrepreneurs who are stepping up to be the change they seek in the world. I'm your host, Jill Hart, the Coach's Alchemist, on a mission to help coaches and entrepreneurs amplify their voice, monetize their mission, and get visible. If you're ready to start attracting premium clients without chasing algorithms or hunting them down like a banshee on a mission, head over to coachesalchemist.com and schedule your free client acquisition audit. It's the first step to building a business where your clients seek you out. Today, we are chatting with Carla Wainwright. Carla is a holistic wellness coach, sexual awakening facilitator, and midlife alchemist. She supports women 40 plus to reclaim vitality, balance their hormones, and reconnect with pleasure and power through metabolic health, nervous system healing, and sensual embodiment. With a background in biology, homeopathy, and over 20 years in the healing arts, Carla bridges the science of the body with the sacredness of lived experience. She leads retreats, group programs, and one-on-one coaching to guide women through midlife as a rite of passage, helping them reawaken desire, embrace radiance, and embody lasting transformation. Welcome to the show, Carla. It's great to have you with us.
Yeah, thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. So, what's the most important or significant thing, in your opinion, as individuals we can do to make an impact on how the world is going?
Mm, it's a beautiful question that has a lot of layers to it. And I think what comes up initially for me is I think that if we want to create impact in the world, we actually have to really feel good in our bodies. And I think that we are, right now in an epidemic of people really feeling poorly in their bodies and disconnected from their bodies. And even though we may have this, inside motivation and beautiful vision of making impact in the world, I think that's really heated by not really connecting with this incredible vessel that we're in. So I guess I would say that the most important thing we can do is start with ourselves and really tend to this body. I call it this, incredible vessel. It's really a miracle. And just take better care of ourselves through whether that's lifestyle, whether that's connecting more with nature, whether that's connecting with loved ones, all the various facets of that, so that we really genuinely feel good within our bodies and our being, so that we can then go do that really important work of creating, beautiful and meaningful impact in the world.
I love that. we- we've gotten here. I've watched the process where it's just like the young is like where it's at. You need to be 20 eternally, and all the women problems that we experience is like every stage of our lives gets medicalized in terms of it's a medical crisis. You're becoming a woman, so now we have to like help you with all of these planning for birth control. And it's just like, and then when you hit menopause, it's like, oh, your life is over. Go sit on the couch. You're irrelevant.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That is, as women, we continue to be somewhat force-fed narratives about the various stages of our lives and, our worthiness at those various points. And there seems to be just a very small sliver of our entire life experience that's considered to be, optimal or the most worthy. And 100% agree that that narrative of shutting things down as we get older is completely ridiculous, and nothing really could be further from the truth. Um, you know, as you said in the introduction, I really do believe that women have this incredible rite of passage that we go through that really helps us move into the most powerful and potent time of our lives.
Yeah, and you help people with this, right? What what
Yeah.
is what is your coaching mainly focused towards?
Yeah, so for many, many years, I was really very much supporting women with connecting with the energy of the divine feminine and waking up that feminine energy, which for so many of us has really been suppressed. for all kinds of reasons, society, culture, families, all of these things, and waking up that energy because I really feel like this is the generative power. This is the creatrix, the power that is really so vital and so needed in our world. And as I started to go through my own perimenopausal and now I'm postmenopausal journey, I really realized that as important it was to connect with our feminine essence, and so that would be our intuition, deep listening of the body, getting connected to the wisdom of the body, being able to feel energy in the body. As I said earlier, taking care of the physical vessel, I realized is as important. They're not more important than each other. Neither is more important, but they're equally important. So, what I support women with is what I term the sacred metabolism, which is really connecting with the physical. So, how do we take care of this vessel in terms of lifestyle? That can be, what we eat, when we eat, circadian rhythms, all sunshine, all of these things, and combining that with the sacred piece of our metabolism, which is our energetic metabolism. And I really have found in my work, through my own experience and work with women, that when these two are addressed together, women are able to step over that threshold into these wisdom years, the sacred spring, the second spring, as it's known in the Taoist system, with just so much more vitality and vibrancy and capacity to become the wise person, the wise woman that she really is meant to be.
Yeah. And how does focusing on metabolic health actually help women in midlife reclaim vitality and clarity? And what
It
shifts when
it is
sacred feminine?
so, excuse me.
No, go
Um,
ahead.
it's so important. So there are statistics that less than 10% of people are metabolically healthy, probably in the Western world. So we are really in a metabolic crisis right now, and it affects women in a very particular way, particularly as women enter that perimenopausal journey. So because our hormones are shifting, we have less of the protective effects, particularly of estrogen, but also progesterone. And that makes us much more susceptible to stress. We all know, those of us who've been on this journey, how easy it is to be stressed, how easy it is to be dysregulated in our nervous system. We really struggle with our sleep. We can struggle with our moods, all of these things. And there is absolutely a metabolic component to this. So because so many of us are what is known as insulin resistant, meaning that our blood sugar kind of is all over the map. That increases cortisol. Cortisol also increases insulin sensitivity, and it affects our sex hormones, it affects our thyroid hormone, and it affects every aspect of our lives. So addressing metabolic health so that we have the physical foundation to really feel good in our bodies, have better sleep, have better blood sugar control, feel just more vital and have more energy day to day is so important. Because if we're feeling completely stressed and depleted and a shell of ourselves in every way, how could we possibly create space to step into a more authentic and powerful version of ourselves, right? So the metabolic piece, I really do feel like we are in a crisis in our societies where people are very unhealthy, whether they know that or not. And I do want to frame that and say, though, the good news is it's all fixable, right? Like it isn't that long or hard to fix, with the right knowledge and the right support. But it is really, really foundational to a woman thriving. And I just want to add one more piece to this, is in a lot of my work, in all my work, is very pleasure focused because pleasure is really this incredible pathway and antidote that particularly women can use to access their wisdom and to really heal their bodies and beings. That said, women consistently choose stress over pleasure. We're hardwired. Our biology has hardwired us to be like this because if we go back, hundreds of thousands of years, there was a survival component to that. We actually had to pay attention to the stress so that we actually would survive. But the reality in our modern society is that we're continually, many, many, many times a day, choosing stress over pleasure. And then if we're metabolically unhealthy, it becomes harder and harder to actually choose pleasure as the antidote to stress. So there's this big layer of our metabolism, our physical metabolism, that we need to pair also with the sacred metabolism in order to be able to move, like I said, over this threshold into this powerful time in our lives.
It's a, it's so fascinating. I'm sitting here thinking about, yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And I can relate to that. And then I was thinking about I have I have an orchard in my backyard, and this is the beautiful time of year where stuff is getting ripe. And being out there with the trees and eating fruit off the trees, it's like a little sacred ritual I perform every day at this time of year, because you can't do it all year. But it just there's something about standing outside in nature among these trees that are my friends, that have a lot of I've planted the fruit trees, but a lot of the rest of the trees are just volunteer trees that have grown in my yard. When we first moved here 5 years ago, there were no trees in my backyard, and now there's over 100 probably in various stages of growth. And it just like it feels good to be in that energy, and it helps regulate the like the pleasureness of life for me.
Absolutely. So I first of all, I love that. I'm a big gardener. I have fruit trees. I'm celebrating the apples on my tree this week, actually. They're so incredible. So I really resonate with what you're sharing. And yes, like being in nature and just connecting in that way and really slowing down and noticing. This is one of the most important practices that we can do as women because the most of us are kind of, there's a term rushing woman syndrome. I'm very guilty of that too. You know, it's like zip, 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 always to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. And slowing down, and nature offers so many beautiful opportunities to do that and just allow ourselves to be connected to our senses very slowly is a very, very powerful reset. So I said earlier that pleasure is one of the first things to go when we're metabolically unhealthy. Paradoxically, pleasure is also the gateway that brings us back, right? But we have to be intentional about it. So you just gave this beautiful example of going into your orchard and having a ritual. I'm all about rituals. They're so important. I think for humans, ritual speaks really deeply to our nervous system and our soul. To eat the apple and be in nature and appreciate the abundance and all of those various pieces. So that in itself, what happens is there's a beautiful cascade that happens. So that experience produces oxytocin in your body. Oxytocin, we know, is like the love and connection hormone. It only has a very short half-life. It only lasts for 2 or 3 minutes, but it's so powerful. And what happens when we get oxytocin is that then begins to lower our cortisol levels. So we can calm down, we can feel more centered, we can feel more of what's happening within ourselves. When our cortisol lowers, our insulin also lowers, and we become more insulin sensitive. And then all of the other hormones underneath that, our sex hormones, our thyroid hormones, also get that beautiful bathing effect of all of the hormones that are upstream of that. So the little ritual that you provided is so, so powerful. And I want to remind women who are listening to this that, you know, you can do this anywhere. It doesn't even have to be outside. But if you can slow down and pause for 2 or 3 minutes with something that gives you great delight and joy, you are doing this incredible healing, like you are creating a beautiful inner alchemy of healing, a cascade of hormones, but also connecting into the sacred metabolism of deep feeling and intuition. That is so, so powerful. So I really thank you for giving that example because it's a perfect visualization of what someone can do each and every day.
Another, I have a different simple one that I- can it can be a profound ritual, or it could just be something you do really quickly. But lighting a candle, I- you can take 5 minutes and really enjoy the process of lighting the candle and just stand there and breathe and appreciate it, the light and the warmth. This is something that I like to do in the winter time, especially early in the morning when I first wake up. It just like it sets a tone for the day that this is like it's a special space. Just little things that our listeners can do to just get into developing some more habits that will serve them better rather than just like the rushing through life, throw on all the lights in the morning when you get up. And it's like we really weren't designed to live an electric life. We were designed to live a process of um, greeting the day and ending the day by the sun and the light. And I read somewhere that people used to wake up in the middle of the night. They would sleep for 4 hours and they would get
Mhm.
up for a couple hours in the middle of the night and do stuff. And then they would go back to bed for another 4 hours or so. And then they would get up and do the daylight stuff, which I thought was really fascinating.
Yeah, I've read that too. Yeah, I have read that too. But you are absolutely right. I mean, there is a huge physiological mismatch between our modern living and, houses with light and computers and all of this and our biology, which of course evolved over hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years. And so it does put an enormous amount of stress because we're just not hardwired. Even though our thinking mind, manages and does all the things. Our bodies did not have the chance to evolutionarily adapt to this very short window. We're just talking about 100 years or so, particularly where there's been such a dramatic shift in our modern lifestyles. But to just come back to the ritual piece, I absolutely agree. And so it's the habitual ritual of slowing down. And again, I want to remind your listeners to really if they're new to this, to just maybe go through each of your senses. So if you're as you're lighting a candle, what is it that you see? Close your eyes and then open your eyes, and then what's the sound of the match hitting the match box, and then the crackling sound, maybe. What is it that you feel in your body, the heat, all of those things. So going through the senses can be really, really powerful. And all of these things are the small little antidotes to our modern living that we really, I feel in some ways almost have a duty to provide our bodies, because our bodies are just crying out for more regulation. They're crying out for more care. But we often tune that out, right? So these small intentional practices, like, and you gave these beautiful two examples, woven through your day, they don't have to take long. They're like a couple of minutes. When they're done with consistency and care and a deep intention, I 100% guarantee you will see powerful shifts happening in your life.
So, how does your coaching look?
Mm. So it is a little bit variable in terms of what somebody comes to me for, because there's different things that, of course, that I can support someone with. But if we're looking at really diving into this idea of the sacred metabolism, I typically start with going through how someone's feeling. There's some questionnaires around that, and just really sort of diving into the nitty-gritty, the more sciencey stuff, because that's often where it feels a little bit easier for people to have as an entry point. So then they leave with specific things that they can do in various aspects of their life, whether it's from food or lifestyle or detoxing, self-care, all of those pieces. And then after we've had just a little bit of time with that, then I start to move into what's going on in this, the deeper energetics. So I love to do exploration using a technique called somatic experiencing, which is really coming into the wisdom of the body and finding out where there are objections or parts within ourselves that may feel reluctant or need some extra support. That is helping a woman really attune to being able to listen and hear the wisdom of her body. I love to use breathwork practices. There's movement practices, and I also draw upon a lot of the sacred qigong practices that are extremely supportive for women to awaken sexual life force energy and circulate it in the body. So I love to do this kind of combination between the two, but of course, meeting every person exactly where they're at. I mean, coaches know this, right? We have to meet people where they're at and then
Mhm.
help guide them. And, gently, I love this concept of titration, of just moving a little bit into what's the unknown or perhaps a little uncomfortable, but within the safe container so that you're able to expand within that.
So you do most of your coaching one-on-one or in groups or both?
I do, so that kind of deep coaching that I was just describing,
Hmm.
I typically do one-on-one, but I do hold group programs. It's a different kind of container, but yes, I do hold group programs. I have one called Feel Great in Your Body, which is basically a metabolic health program. I bring the pleasure piece, I bring the feminine energy piece into it, but it's a great program for women to embark on to start making some of those changes in their lives.
So let me ask you, pleasure is often overlooked when it comes to health. How does embracing pleasure, both sexual and non-sexual, support hormonal health, resilience, and long-term well-being for women over 40?
Yeah. So isn't that a shame that pleasure is overlooked? I think it's one of the most important pieces. I believe pleasure is your birthright, right? As human beings, we have this capacity to experience pleasure in so many ways. And I also think that pleasure, sometimes we have to define it like this. We have to say, well, sexual or otherwise. Like pleasure, of course, can be sexual pleasure, but it can be so many things. It can be looking at a sunrise. It can be, feeling the warm water on your head in the shower. It could be having a loving conversation with somebody. So, as I said earlier, why pleasure is so important is because it creates within our bodies this cascade of chemicals that actually helps to rewire our system, that allows us to be more resilient, to handle stress better, to be more insulin sensitive so we don't have those big highs and lows from the things that we eat. And to help navigate, it really does help the sex hormone piece as we move through that perimenopausal journey, where there are so many waves. Like there are going to be waves, of course, because we're going from being menstruating and potentially fertile to not, right? And so that's going to happen. That's not a bad thing, but it can be very challenging because of those waves. So what pleasure does is it signals to the brain and the body to release this cascade of chemicals, starting with oxytocin, to really soften and dampen some of those downstream effects that can be really, really challenging, which whereas where most women really suffer. And so imagine if you went to the doctor's office and instead of them giving you a prescription for antidepressants or whatever, which you're not going crazy. You just, you just need support and understanding and tools. They gave you a list of, I want you to do 5 pleasurable things a day, and I want you to, at night before you go to bed, write those down so that you relive them again and create more pleasure in your body. I want you to go take a 3-day retreat, or, go walk in the forest every day after work, or whatever that is. Like, imagine if we were taught from a young age that pleasure is one of the most powerful medicines that we could actually integrate into our lives. I mean, it would be radical.
It would be radical. I think part of it is an awareness, has an awareness element to it, in that we we tend as women to be trained to just power through. Like men's cycles are 12-hour cycles. Women's cycles are 28-day cycles. And a woman is not the same day to day, month to month on the same period. It might be, yeah. And this does not go away when you go over menopause. You just quit menstruating, but you still have cycles in your body that maybe it's tuned to the moon. I don't know. But you do have times when you need to be more circumspect, and other times you're just like full of energy, you're ready to go, go, go. But it's not every day does not look the same. And when we smush ourselves into these channels where we have to show up from to work from whatever time to whatever time and stay there and be productive, even when your body is screaming, no, what you need to do is go home and sleep because it's working on something. Or it just, it's just like we're taught to just ignore the signals our body's giving us. And I think that's why there's so much disease, that and the poor food supply that we insist on eating. We just, we're just not taking the time to appreciate the the beauty and the pleasurable things in our lives. So we all experience pleasure throughout our day, but usually we just like gloss over it. Oh, that was fun. Next. Or it's not significant. We're taught that, you shouldn't be proud of stuff, and that's not really all that big of a deal. And we try to pick it apart for why it's not a great thing that we can celebrate. And we don't celebrate things. It's just like, why is that?
Well, I absolutely agree. Women are cyclical beings, and that absolutely does not stop once finish menstruating. And I think that, because we're cyclical beings trying to function in a world that is very linear, that is very masculinized, and we try to fit into boxes, and you know what, I'm really tired and I need to take a nap. We don't give ourselves permission because we're trying to live this very sort of linear, masculinized life. We are not many men, and it's I think it's done horrendous things to our health, not listening and not feeling worthy enough to be able to take that stand for ourselves. And that's one of the things that menopause does, is that we actually step more into claiming that space and feeling ready to say, actually, no, I'm not going to. I want a nap, I'm going to take a nap. And that's just how it is. And everybody else can just deal with it. But I'm sorry, I actually forgot your question. Like, why is it that,
Why is it that we just put up with all of this,
yeah, why
really?
is it that we
It's
put
like,
up with it? Well, I think the conversation is changing. I think that, shows like yours, these conversations that are being had. I mean, if we think about our mother's generation and what they, and beyond that, the suffering that they went through, the invisibility that was kind of forced upon them. I think that that is changing. There's still so much work to do. And I do believe, though, that there is this deep remembrance awakening within women of that there's something more, and that I'm powerful and I want to actually really connect and harness that power so that I can be, I can be me, and I can be me in the fullest version of that in the world. So I believe the seeds have been planted, and there is an awakening happening, but we have to still take care of ourselves. We still have to have conversations. We have to support and uplift other women. All of these things are vital if we really want to get to the point where we're flourishing, our daughters are flourishing, and women are flourishing in harmony with men, of course, right? But that we're not trying to be like junior males on this linear pathway that clearly does not work well for us.
it's more like broken males. I think
Yes.
women for the last 120 years have been just like, they've men looked at women, scientists primarily, and said, "Oh, they're just broken men. Let's fix them. We can make it all better." And it really didn't need to be better. And I think, the whole burn the witches at the stake thing. I, Witches were just really intuitive women, and often they were landowners and had a lot of knowledge about life and nature, and that was it, it made men uncomfortable. And I think that's how that whole thing, like, actually, probably King James is like the first to, he's the one that put it in the Bible. And whether you're religious or not, it has had an impact on our history, how these things have moved along. And looking at women as like the weaker vessel, just because we're broken men. We're little broken men and we need to be fixed, but we're not. We're a different genetic makeup, and we have different cycles, and we have different ways of expressing ourselves in the world. we are just one aspect of a two aspect component. There's the male and the female, and it's not to say that there aren't other genders or whatever. Because there's the part where that mixes. And it people shouldn't be made to feel broken. Anywhere, men or women, genetic or not, it's just like you should just be able to be accepted for who you are and be able to express yourself the way you came here to express yourself.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. There's, healing from generations and generations and generations that is really has a profound impact on us. We may not think that, oh, well, that happened so many hundreds of years ago in my family line. Absolutely. I mean, as you said, the witches, they were the healers. They were the wise women. They had knowledge, sometimes land, sometimes all of these things. And so that was a threat. And what was the result of that? That just made women more silent, smaller, like, don't notice me, because noticing could be dangerous, right? So we really have to be brave and step out of the shadow of some of that history, even some of our own personal history. I mean, we've all had experiences where we've been shut down, minimized, made small. But I really encourage, women to remember at the core of who they are, even if it's just, the smallest of remembrances of that, and then take those small incremental steps towards really nourishing and supporting that part of you to become really all of you. Absolutely.
Yeah, I love the movement towards a more holistic existence, whereas for a long time it was just everything was in your head. Your head is just like a very small portion of your whole body.
Yes. And then we have a pill for that.
Yes. Here, let's fix that. Never mind that it's going to destroy like a bunch of other systems in your body that, and the whole one thing fits all solutions.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no.
The one other thing I'll say about that too, because maybe a lot of people don't realize, but most medical studies are done on men. Very few medical studies are actually done on women. So, the data is not accurate, right? Because we are cyclical, and especially when we are menstruating, we have different phases and hormones in different places. And so, yes, I think that there's a real shift that needs to happen that recognize that, our bodies and beings are different and need to be acknowledged and revered for being different.
And trusted. It's
Yes.
okay to trust your body and that your body will tell you what it needs or doesn't need. And sometimes we can use our mouth to express this to other people. We don't have to just like, I'll give you an example. I went to the doctor because I was having really bad headaches. Like they would come on and they would be like really crushing it. So they did an MRI and I got a copy of the test. And if you're going to have tests in a medical facility, you need to get a copy of that test and look at it, whether it's a blood test, whatever it is. And I'm here to say I'm not a medical professional, but this has served me well in that I look up all of the numbers that they put on there and I see what they mean, what they're measuring. Understanding these tests that you're paying hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars for, it's your data. You have a right to it. You don't have to just depend on the person in the white coat because they don't have a vested interest in your life. You do. So, then you can have a conversation with them that is a little more equal. Um, anyway, I had this MRI done and I have a collapsed patella. My pituitary gland is flat where it's supposed to be round. And your pituitary gland is like responsible for like everything in your body. And try as I might, I have I have trouble finding out how that actually has impacted my body. I've been working on blowing it up again, but it's just like it's a mental game for me. Existential exercise. So, um, But the doctor, nobody ever mentioned it to me. The only reason I knew about it was because I got a copy of the test.
Hmm.
So I think the lesson is that you need to take personal responsibility for your health. What was causing the headaches was that, and I figured this out on my own, is the way I was holding my neck. If I hold my neck in a certain way, I've had so many injuries that it cuts off the blood supply, and I get these headaches because my body is trying to tell me, hey, you're cutting off the blood supply to your brain. You need to do something different there.
I'm glad you resolved that. And I totally agree. You know, if you get tests done, you should be asking for the results. And yeah, don't give your power away. They're your test results. Ask for them.
Yeah. And they'll give them to you. It just most people don't know that you A can ask for them
Mm.
and B that they're willing to give them to you. So I know that you have a free vibrancy guide. Do you want to talk a little
Hmm.
bit about that?
Sure. So my vibrancy guide is this beautiful first step that women can take to really step into caring more for this sacred metabolism. So I've put 5 steps in there. So incorporating various things from, yeah, reconnecting with your body through timing of eating, getting outside, pleasure practices, all of these various things. So they're very small, practical things that women can do right away to come into the space of creating a more healthy, sacred metabolism.
I love that. And you can find that at vibrancyreset.com. Vibrancy.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yep. Vibrancyreset.com.
perfect. Thank you so much for joining me today, Carla.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. I loved our conversation. Thank you.
You too. To learn more about Carla and download her free vibrancy guide, please visit vibrancyreset.com, and we'll be sure to put that link in the show notes below. Thanks for tuning in with us today to the You World Order Showcase podcast. If you're ready to amplify your voice, monetize your mission, and start attracting premium clients, your next step is simple. Head to thecoachesalchemist.com and schedule your free client acquisition audit. Be sure to join us for our next episode as we share what others are doing to raise the global frequency. And remember, change begins with you. You have all the power to change the world. Start today and get visible.